Did you know that in IELTS listening, half of the questions are usually filling the blanks? And then there are always some multiple choice questions and either a map or a matching information task. Over the years of studying them, I found some tips and strategies that can make them a little bit easier for you, so you could answer more questions correctly and get a higher score. Get your pen and paper ready. It's Asia. Let's get started. IELTS listening is the same for both academic and general training students. Every test begins with a set of filling the blanks questions. Our task is from Cambridge Practice Tests number 18, the latest book. And these tests are just like the real exams. And actually, any recent book from number 15 and up will do. There are some free practice tests too, and all of them are linked in my IELTS study plan. You can download it in the description box below. It's completely free. So let's have a look at the task together, and I'll share a few tips with you, and then you try to solve the task, okay? Write one word and or a number for each answer. So make sure you don't write 2 words or more. When looking at the task, try to anticipate the answers. For example, home address, street. So the name of the street will be spelled out for you. Heard about us from a. Note the article a is already there, so you don't need to include it in your answer. Generally, don't include articles in your answers. If an article is needed, it will be in the statement. If there is no article, then the answer is either plural, cats, or uncountable, fish. Spelling counts. If you make a spelling mistake, you won't get a point. Both British and American spelling are acceptable. This part is usually a dialogue, often a telephone conversation. So now try to answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, Wayside Camera Club. Breeder speaking.
Oh, hello. My name's Dan, and I'd like to join your club.
That's great, Dan. We have an application form. Would you like to complete it over the phone? Then you can ask any questions you might have.
Oh, yes, thanks.
Okay. So, what's your family name?
It's Green. Dan Green.
So, can I take your email address?
Yes, it's dan1068@market.com.
Thanks. And what about your home address?
Well, I'm about 10 miles away from your club in Peacetown. I live in a house there.
Okay. So, what's the house number and street?
It's 52 Marrowfield Street.
Is that MARROWFIELD?
That's right.
And that's Peacetown, you said.
Uh-huh.
So, how did you hear about our club? Did you look on the internet?
I usually do that, but this time, well, I was talking to a relative the other day and he suggested it.
Oh, is he a member too?
He belongs to another club, but he'd heard good things about yours.
Okay. So, what do you hope to get from joining?
Well, one thing that really interests me is the competitions that you have. I enjoy entering those.
Right. Anything else?
Well, I also like to socialise with other photographers.
That's great. So, what type of membership would you like?
What are the options?
It's £30 a year for full membership, or £20 a year if you're an associate.
I think I'll go for the full membership then.
That's a good idea, because you can't vote in meetings with an associate membership.
Now, the second part is pretty unusual. In IELTS listening, it's almost always no more than 1 word or 1 word and a number. But I've found no more than 2 words. Don't thank me. When you have a little table like this, first of all, read the table title. photography competitions. And then the title of each column, title of the competition, instructions, feedback to Dan. Now you know what to expect. Then look through the rest of the information. Ready to answer the questions?
If I could just find out a bit more about you.
Okay.
So, you said you wanted to compete. Have you ever won any photography competitions?
Not yet, but I have entered 3 in the past.
Oh, that's interesting. So, why don't you tell me something about those? Let's start with the first one.
Well, the theme was entitled Domestic Life.
I see. So, it had to be something related to the home?
Yeah, I chose to take a photo of a family sitting round the dinner table having a meal. And, I didn't win, but I did get some feedback.
Oh, what did the judges say?
That it was too busy as a picture.
Aha. So it was the composition of the picture that they criticised?
That's right. And once they'd told me that, I could see my mistake.
So what was the theme of the second competition?
Well, my university was on the coast, and that area gets a lot of beautiful sunsets. So that was the theme.
Oh, sunsets. That's a great theme.
Yes, the instructions were to capture the clouds as well. It couldn't just be blue sky and a setting sun.
Sure, because they give you all those amazing pinks and purples.
Yeah, and I thought I'd done that well, but the feedback was that I should have waited a bit longer to get the shot.
I see. So the timing wasn't right.
Yes, I took it too soon, basically. And then the third competition I entered was called Animal Magic.
Well, that's a difficult subject.
I know. I had to take hundreds of shots.
I'm sure, because animals move all the time.
That's what we had to show. There had to be some movement in the scene. I got a great shot of a fox in the end, but I took it at night and, well, I suspected that it was a bit dark, which is what I was told.
Well, Dan, you seem to be really keen, and we'd be delighted to have you in our club. I'm sure we can help with all those areas that you've outlined.
Thanks, that's great.
Done? Great. We'll check all the answers at the end. And the next task is a map. It may feel confusing at first, but I think if you know where to look, we can make it more manageable. First of all, read the elements on the map. Start with the title, Minster Park. In the center of the park, there is a lily pond. Then we see a number of gates. West Gate, South Gate, East Gate. To the north of the park, there is a river. You may also be given directions to the north, to the south, or in the southeast corner. Look for a starting point, usually an entrance, and usually located at the bottom of the map. My bet is on the south gate, but you should anticipate but always listen to the recording. And there is a reason why we're looking at the map before the questions. All IELTS listening questions come in order. You will hear about question number 15, Statue of Diana Gosforth, then 16, wooden sculptures, and so on. A couple of tips before you hear the recording. If you missed an answer, move on to the next question. Don't try to find it while the recording is still playing. You only miss more answers. There is some time at the end when you can come back to any unanswered questions and cross out used options on the map. It makes it easier to see what's left. Ready to solve the task?
If you look at this map, you'll see the familiar outline of the park, with the river forming the northern boundary, and a gate in each of the other 3 walls. The statue of Diana Gosforth has been moved. It used to be close to the south gate, but it's now immediately to the north of the lily pond. almost in the centre of the park, which makes it much more visible. There's a new area of wooden sculptures, which are on the riverbank, where the path from the east gate makes a sharp bend. There are two areas that are particularly intended for children. The playground has been enlarged and improved, and that's between the river and the path that leads from the pond to the river. Then there's a new maze, a circular series of paths separated by low hedges. That's near the west gate. You go north from there towards the river and then turn left to reach it. There have been tennis courts in the park for many years, and they've been doubled, from 4 to 8. They're still in the southwest corner of the park, where there's a right-angle bend in the path. Something else I'd like to mention is the new fitness area. This is right next to the lily pond on the same side as the west gate. Now, as you're all gardeners, I'm sure you'll like to hear about the plants that have been chosen for the park.
A lot of directions, right? To the north of the pond, in the southwest corner, you should definitely get confident with those. Now, maps and other tasks often have what we call distractors, incorrect answers mentioned. Sometimes you will hear the distractor first and then the correct answer. For example, it used to be but it's now Sometimes the correct answer comes first. We decided to leave the library, although we thought about moving it, Only some, actually a minority of IELTS tests have a map. A more popular task used instead is matching information. This task has a box with options and questions underneath. First of all, read the statement at the top because it gives you the context. What information does the speaker give about each of the following areas of the museum? Next, instead of studying the map like we did previously, study the options. I mean, read each option carefully to remember what it's about. Options are usually paraphrased, so look for the same meaning, not the exact words. Cross out used options. A really helpful thing to remember is that questions again come in order. They're not paraphrased. So you can easily follow number 15, Four Seasons, then number 16, Farmhouse, etc. Hopefully giving you enough time to find the right answers. Pause the video now to read the options and then answer the questions. Ready?
I'd like to tell you about the different areas of the museum. Just inside and outside the main gallery, we have an area called Four Seasons. Here, you can watch a 4-minute animation of a woodland scene. It was designed especially for the museum by a group of young people on a film studies course, and it's beautiful. Children absolutely love it, but then so do adults. The main gallery is called Town and Country. It includes a photographic collection of prize-winning sheep and shepherds. Leaving Town and Country, you enter Farmhouse Kitchen, which is, well, self-explanatory. Here, we have the oldest collection of equipment for making butter and cheese in the country. And this morning, a specialist cheesemaker will be giving demonstrations of how it's produced. You may even get to try some. After that, you can go in 2 directions. To the right is a staircase that takes you up to a landing from where you can look down on the galleries. To the left is a room called A Year on the Farm. There is lots of seating here, as sometimes we use the room for school visits, so it's a good place to stop for a rest. If you're feeling competitive, you can take our memory test, in which you answer questions about things you've seen in the museum. The next area is called Wagon Walk. This contains farm carts from nearly every part of the country. It's surprising how much regional variation there was. Beside the carts are display boards with information about each one. The carts are old and fragile, so we ask you to keep your children close to you and ensure they don't climb on the carts. From Wagon Walk, you can either make your way back to reception or go out into the garden, or even go back to take another look in the galleries. In the far corner of the garden is Bees Are Magic, but we're redeveloping this area so you can't visit that at the moment. You can still buy our honey in the shop though. Finally, there's the pond, which contains all kinds of interesting wildlife. There are baby ducks that are only a few days old, as well as tiny frogs. The pond isn't deep, and there is a fence around it, so it's perfectly safe for children.
In this one, there was no map to follow, but the type of task is still quite similar, right? And the better you know the options in advance, the easier it is to answer the questions. Now let's talk about the type of questions that most students voted for as the most difficult, multiple choice. These questions may be more or less difficult depending on where in the test you find them. I've selected the more difficult ones for you. There are two types. First, you have 5 options and 2 correct answers. Then 3 options and 1 answer. Each option will be discussed. Answers are determined by certain details. The only way to answer is to read all the options before the recording starts playing, but there is not enough time for that. So what you can do is use the time for revision from the previous section to read these questions. Underline keywords. Each option is only discussed once, so cross out incorrect answers. And be prepared to hear a dialogue, usually between 2 students, who may have different opinions or change their minds, so look out for that. Again, pause the video, read the questions, and then answer them. Let's do it.
So now I want you to discuss the lesson we've just been watching on the video and think about the ways in which origami can be a useful educational tool. Can you all work with the person sitting next to you?
I had no idea that such a simple thing like folding squares of paper to make the shape of something like a bird could be such an amazing tool. It's made me see origami in a whole new light.
I know. It was interesting to see the educational skills the children were developing by doing origami. On the video, you could see them really listening hard to make sure they did all the steps in the right order to make the bird.
That's right. In this lesson, they were working individually, but it would also be interesting to see if the children could work out how to make something simple without being given any direction. That would help with building teamwork as well.
Yes, but much more of a challenge. One thing that really stood out for me was that the children were all having fun while being taught something new.
Which is a key aim of any lesson with this age group. And although these kids had no problems with folding the paper, with younger children you could do origami to help practice fine motor skills.
Absolutely. I think one reason why the origami activity worked so well in this class was that the teacher was well prepared.
Right. I think it would have taken me ages to prepare examples showing each of the steps involved in making the bird, but that was a really good idea. The children could see what they were aiming for, and much better for them to be able to hold something rather than just looking at pictures.
Those physical examples supported her verbal explanations really well.
It's strange that origami isn't used more widely. Why do you think that is?
Well, teachers may just feel it's not that appealing to children who are used to doing everything on computers, especially boys, even if they're aware of the benefits.
Oh, I don't know. It's no different to any other craft activity. I bet it's because so many teachers are clumsy like me.
That's true. Too much effort required if you're not good with your hands.
Well, anyway, I think we should try it out in our maths teaching practice with Year 3. I can see using origami is a really engaging way of reinforcing children's knowledge of geometric shapes, like they were doing in the video. But I think it would also work really well for presenting fractions, which is coming up soon.
Good idea. That's something most of the kids in that class might struggle with. Origami would also be good practice for using symmetry, but I think they did that last term.
OK, well, let's try and get some ideas together and plan the lesson next week.
Okay, on we go to part 4. The last set of questions is of the same type as the first, filling the blanks. But the context is more challenging, a lecture. The task is divided into sections, like in our example. Pay attention to the subheaders. They can help you navigate. You'll hear about Hugo's novel, then his early career, exile from France, and finally his house. Try to predict the answers. Some key words are repeated while others are paraphrased. Pause the video to read the questions and then answer them.
The person I've chosen to talk about is the French writer Victor Hugo. Many people have heard of him because his novel, Les Miserables, which he wrote in 1862, is famous around the world. It became a stage musical in the 1980s, and a film version was also released in 2012. So some of us, I'm sure, have a pretty general idea of the plot, but we know much less about the author. Today, I'm going to provide a little more insight into this talented man, and I'm going to talk particularly about the home he had on the island of Guernsey in the British Channel Islands. But first, his early career. As I've said, he was a writer. He was at the height of his career in Paris, and he was very highly regarded by his colleagues. As far as literature was concerned, he was the leading figure of the Romantic movement. However, as well as being a literary genius, he also gave many speeches about issues like the level of poverty in his society. He felt very strongly about this and about other areas where change was needed, like education. This kind of outspoken criticism was not well liked by the rulers of France, and eventually the Emperor, Napoleon III, told Victor Hugo to leave Paris and not return. In other words, he sent him into exile. So Victor Hugo was forced to reside in other parts of Europe. Guernsey was actually his third place of exile, and he landed there in 1855. He produced a lot while on Guernsey, including Les Miserables, and to do this, he had to spend a great deal of time in the home that he had there. This was a property that he bought using the money he'd made in France from the publication of a collection of his poetry. It was the only property he ever owned, and he was very proud of it. The property Victor Hugo bought on Guernsey was a large 5-storey house in the capital town of St. Peter Port, and he lived there for 15 years, returning to France in 1870 when Napoleon's empire collapsed. He decorated and furnished each level or floor of the house in unique and wonderful ways, and many people consider the inside of the house to be a work of art. Today, it's a museum that attracts 200,000 visitors a year. He lived in the house with his family, and portraits of its members still hang in rooms on the ground floor, along with drawings that he did during his travels that he felt were important to him. In other ground floor rooms, there are huge tapestries that he would have designed and loved. The walls are covered in dark wood panelling that Victor Hugo created himself using wooden furniture that he bought in the market. The items were relatively inexpensive, and he used them to create intricate carvings. They gave an atmosphere on the lower level that was shadowy and rather solemn. On the next level of the house, there are 2 impressive lounges where he entertained his guests. One lounge has entirely red furnishings, such as sofas and wall coverings, and the other blue. There's a strong Chinese influence in these areas in things like the wallpaper pattern and the lamps, which he would have made himself by copying original versions. His library, where he left many of his favourite books, forms the hallway to the 3rd floor and was a comfortable area where he could relax and enjoy his afternoons. And then, at the very top of the house, there's a room called the Lookout. Called that because it looks out over the harbour. In contrast to the rather dark lower levels, it's full of light and was like a glass office where he would write until lunchtime, often at his desk. So, Victor Hugo was a man of many talents, but he was also true to his values. While living in his house on Guernsey, he entertained many other famous writers, but he also invited a large group of local children from the deprived areas of the island to dinner once a week. What's more, he served them their food, which was an extraordinary gesture for the time period. In 1927, the house was owned by his relatives, and they decided to donate it to the city of Paris. It has since been restored using photographs from the period, and, as I mentioned earlier, is now a museum that is open to the public.
Okay, how did it go? Here is one thing to keep in mind. Don't leave questions unanswered. Marks for incorrect answers are not deducted, so make your best guess. You have some time at the end of the test when you can do it. 10 minutes in a paper-based test and 2 minutes if you take IELTS on computer. Now, before I show you the answers, I've also prepared for you the audio scripts. You'll see them one after another. If you find any mistakes, I recommend reading the script to figure out why you made this particular mistake. This can help you avoid similar errors next time. Here are all the audio scripts from today's lesson if you need to come back to them. And here are the answers. There were 37 questions today, and in the real test, you're gonna have 40, of course. If you've noticed that certain types of questions were more difficult for you, I have detailed video lessons on each type of question we looked into today. And if you download my free IELTS study plan, it can help you prepare for your exam, for each section of your exam, and that's where you can find links to all the resources as well. Thank you so much for watching me today. Good luck with your preparation and your exam. Bye!